So this is the third year we've done the Relix Live Music Conference, and every year has been even better and better. So once again, let's have one more round of applause for Brad Tucker for putting this all together. Brad started as a Relix intern, like so many of us, myself included, and has come to produce this great event. So a lot of what we're going to be talking about today is grassroots fandom and building a fan base and a community, and Brad was a really big part of that for Relix. So we're really, really happy he brought this to life here. Now, as I said, this is the third year we've done this conference, but this is actually the first time that we've had a panel dedicated to a band. And I think it's actually the perfect band to focus on because in addition to having been a band since 1991 and being one of the only bands who I think has played every single year since 1991 with the founding lineup still intact, they really gave their fans a chance not just to appreciate the music, but to be real ambassadors to that music, selling CDs, spreading the word, and a lot of that was through in the late 90s and the mid-90s, their rep program. And pretty much everyone that was on the stage here was a Guster rep, and in the last 20 and 30 years has gone on to really shape the live music industry, the festival industry, and we're really excited to have a Guster Old Timers Day here. So let's get Ryan and Brian and everyone else up here.
Yay! Thanks for sitting for this thing. Thanks for coming. I'm Ryan. That's Brian.
I'm Brian.
Okay, Mike has a little bit of an agenda here that we're gonna defer to him as we go. And I don't know. Do you want to introduce Does everybody just want to say quickly who they are?
I think everyone should introduce themselves, given.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I'm Mike. I am the editor-in-chief of Relix here with Dean Budnick. I gave my spiel. I've been a Guster fan since the mid-'90s. I think I've seen them every single year without fail since 1997, which I don't think I could say for any other band. And I'm excited that this has come to fruition after so many years.
Well, okay, real quick. Do all that and then say what your first show was.
I think the first show that I was part of was Club Toast in Burlington in '97.
Yeah.
Hey, I'm Laurence Freedman, Telegraph Road Management. And Guster was one of my favorite bands to go see as a kid. I think my first show was Irving Plaza, Goldfly era. And it's amazing to see all these people who I admire in the biz and as friends, you guys included, coming together to kind of celebrate what a wonderful history we had.
Laurence and I actually predate Guster. We were in camp together, and we were in Pippin together.
That is true.
Laurence was Pippin, and I was in the ensemble, and that kind of foreshadowed the next 20 years of our friendship.
We won't be showing that right now.
Hi, my name is Noah Chernin. I work at Network at Dalton Sim Management. My first Guster concert was in May 1997 at Maxwell's.
R.I.P. Maxwell's.
R.I.P. I got a flyer in high school from my friend Elise Feibush about you guys playing at Temple. I think it was like 2 months before. And she was like, my friends know these guys, and it was the first time I ever heard of a band that was like successful in my mind that people knew. Before that, it was like bands like Radiohead or the Beatles or something, and I was like, oh, people like know these guys. You could email them. I thought that was great. And now I'm one of their managers.
Quick aside, was that the one Temple show you guys played that everyone references, or was there other Temple shows that we don't know about?
I feel like I've met 6,000 people who were at that Temple show. You know what I mean? It's like we played one Temple. It's like, oh, I saw you at a Temple.
It's like the Sex Pistols show.
It was in Princeton, New Jersey.
It's a lot like a Sex Pistols show.
Yeah.
It was a mega shul.
Hey, Carla, you're up.
Hi. Hey, I'm Carla. I'm the woman. So my name's Carla Sosenko. I'm executive editor at Us Weekly magazine. Thanks. My first Guster show was on Lansdowne Street, and I want to say Avalon.
Yep.
Like summer 97. So yeah, but I was also at that Maxwell show, I think. So I've been listening for a long time. And I don't know, I'm happy to be here with all you dudes.
A lot of dudes.
A lot of dudes.
A lot of dudes.
I'll follow that. My name's Michael Corcoran. I work at a company called mTheory now. My first Guster show was in May of 1995. 95. And I was 18 years old. It was at the Wetlands. Shout out. Yeah. It was hot. And I recorded the show. And then I remember the second time seeing Guster, which was a couple months later at the Wetlands, coming up to Brian and being, again, yes, saying, "Hey, I recorded your show. Can do you want me to send you a copy?" And he's like, "No, can we send you copies of your shows, of our shows?" And so I ended up helping them kind of distribute some of the live stuff, and ended up going on the road with these guys after college and working with them for several years and retiring after that. And yeah, living in Nashville now.
Hello, Johnny Beach. Work at Bowery Presents. I think my first Guster show was 7 Willow Street in Portchester, I think in July '95. I think you guys opened for Firm Good Homes. Probably makes sense. And then shortly after that, I got my driver's license and was able to drive Noah to Guster shows, and there we go.
I used to have to drive Johnny to Guster shows before he got his driver's license. My name's Rich Schaefer. I work at AEG Presents in New York. I don't know. I might have been at that 7 Willow Street show. I was a big From Good Homes fan. That's how I got introduced to Guster. But I definitely remember Irving Plaza, November of '95. I think you guys were opening for Homes. Or 90, yeah, I don't know. Somewhere around there. But, we saw him a bunch. I bailed Johnny out of jail one night after a Guster show. And then, sorry, Mrs. Beach. And then I ended up working at their record label in 2001 for a little bit at London Sire Records, and so I got to work with them very closely a little bit, and yeah.
Hi, I'm Dalton Sim, Dalton Sim Management Network. I'm trying to think of what year I first met you guys.
Somewhere around Aware.
We met you on the Horde tour. Yeah. Oh no, the Aware.
No, I think it was the Aware Records night at Mamakin, which was Aerosmith's bar in Boston. Rest in peace, Mamakin. And I met you there, and same, like all these guys, same sort of story. I just introduced myself to the band and said, as a fan, said hello, and I think then we met again after that at Horde Festival, passing out newspapers for Greg Latterman. So we passed out the daily newspaper at the Horde Festival.
Right.
So back then at Horde, they printed a newspaper of the lineup. They printed like 15,000 of them. I thought I was going to like hang backstage. I think you guys did too. And instead we got suckered into passing out the newspapers.
And then you became our manager.
And then I became their manager.
And now you're our manager.
I kind of want to boil this down for a second. Besides reminiscing, the reason that this is a panel and that we're all here is that I'm looking on these couches at people who, for the most part, emailed me when they were teenagers and said, "Hey, I like your band." And what we did was create a formal system where these guys could help us spread our music, because we didn't have distribution. We didn't have Guster CDs in stores. So we had people like these sell our CDs to their friends in exchange for a free T-shirt, a free spot on the guest list, and just generally feeling connected to us. So that really was a great way to develop a grassroots band. It's kind of like we were not a jam band, but we were using the jam band model of touring and grassroots kind of style development. And to see you guys all so successful so many years later, this feels like a reunion of like 90s old friends.
And just so we're clear, it's not going to be like, we really want to avoid, other than the next thing I'm going to say, I want to avoid this being self-congratulatory or self-aggrandizing of like, how great are we? I do want to connect this to the conference, and we definitely have a way to do that. But I did want to just briefly kind of just say that the genesis of the program, because I think there was this was proto-internet, there was no internet, we didn't have email addresses at this point, and I think what basically, what really happened is I grew up in Dallas, and there was a band called Jacko Pierce that was really big in Dallas when yeah, a little of that. And the band had started, we were sophomores, I think. We were living in Bush Hall, you and I, so that must have been sophomore year. There was a phone number inside their CD that they made on their own record label, and I got drunk when I was 19. I called them, and I was like, I love your band. I just want you to know. And the guy called me back, and he was like, hey, you said you have a band, right? It was like, why don't you put together a show for us in Boston? You can open up for us, and we'll come up. And so they ended up routing their tour, and they came to Boston. They came to our dorm. They had their mountain bikes on the back of their RV. They had their shit together. We opened up for them at the Black Rose in Boston, and they had this amazing. We brought 200 of our friends. They had an amazing show, and there was kind of a light bulb moment that went off, I think, with us that was like, wow, you don't have to be a major label band. I just remember one of the most memorable moments of my life to see them driving away in their RV with their mountain bikes on the back, going to the next place and being like, fuck, this is doable. You can be a band. You can just go drive around and be a band. And I think both their model of touring and also the idea that they put a phone number in their CD was the real genesis of this thing. And then
I think all we ever did was formalize that process. You made a casual phone call to Jacko Pierce, and we're like, yeah, we love you, come to Boston. And they knew that they could have a good show if they harnessed our energy and made it happen. And
So then we're just going to just quickly, so what the reps were is basically someone like Michael would write and say, hey, I really love your band. And before we knew him or whatever, we would just say, okay, here's your fake nickname. Your fake nickname, and this is actually true. It's a bad example with Pasty because we called you Pasty before we even met you, and you were Pasty. And then you were Pasty for to your mom for a long time. So we would give you a fake nickname. We'd find a cereal box. We'd put 10 or 20 CDs. We'd say, how many do you want? And we'd put 10 or 20 CDs in a cereal box and give them a little Guster rep card and say, here's a CD, here's a T-shirt. When you sell them, give us back $100 for 10 CDs, or give us back $200 for 20 CDs. And we didn't make people pay up front, and I think that was a really huge part of why this thing worked, because it was all compelled on trust. It was like, you like our band? Here, we're going to send you this stuff. Send us our money. And to this day, adults will come up and be like, I never paid you. I owe you $50. There was some of that. But I think just right out of the gates, we were very interested in just being really open and really sincere and really trusting to our fans and knowing that would sort of come back and help us. So that was basically what it was. And then Brian found his list that you wanted to read, right, quickly.
Well, I found this. This is the sheet that we sent to every Guster rep. When they emailed us, we sent them a box of CDs, and these are the terms of the Guster rep deal. Having received this form, I acknowledge that my name is no longer, and then we'd write their name in the blank. I agree that for the rest of my life, I will go by the Guster code name, and then we'd come up with some dumb name and write it in there, like Pasty, Coolio, whatever it was. Johnny Beach was Coolio. Can we please call Johnny Beach Coolio? And then it says, I sell Guster discs for $10 each, going down to $9.97 for stubborn customers. It was just and if I sell 20 CDs, I get an autographed jar of raspberry fluff, which is something we really did. We had raspberry fluff jars that we autographed with Sharpies and would send to them if they sold 20 CDs.
That's true.
Just let that settle in for a minute.
Really, it's settling. Okay. Was there some way to connect this to live music, Mike?
Well, I think that, it's actually pretty amazing that someone actually still has their list there. I was Salt State, by the way. That was my Guster name. But I think that the fact that you guys empowered people to really turn their fandom into something that was more tangible. You guys were out there selling CDs, feeling that you could approach people, bring them, in some cases even help promote shows and stuff like that. I think gave people, myself included, gave them a sense that this could be a viable life, this could be a viable career. I mean, I was really into Pearl Jam and Phish and all these people, and as a kid growing up in Westchester, I wasn't gonna end up anywhere near those worlds. But the fact that you guys were sending us CDs, we were selling them, it wasn't just like, I'm a big Guster fan, you should check them out next time they play Irving Plaza. It was like, here's the CD, I'm the one who sold it to you, I turned you on to it, blah, blah, blah. And I think that there was a real sense of community developed with that. And I think that's a lot what this conference is about. This conference is about the business of live music. And you guys were basically laying out a blueprint that a lot of people follow today at a time. This is before the internet was really widespread. This was before Twitter and social media allowed people to interact with their favorite artists in the way that they can in this day and age. And I think that's another big part of your guys' stories. The way you guys kind of used the road journal and some of your interactions on stage with people really did feel like it was a dialogue. It wasn't just, we're over here in the audience and you're up here on stage. It felt their barrier was a little bit more blurry.
Yeah, I think the accessibility you guys had to the fans was really notable for young kids such as ourselves at the time. The 90s was a peak time for the music business, and as a kid growing up, you see your favorite musicians as stars, basically. You're connecting to them at home in your room or whatever, and you go to see the show, they're up on stage, and it's like never even occurs to you that you might be able to meet them or talk to them or be welcomed by them. And so for me, I had a chance encounter with you guys early on. I was maybe 16. I'd driven to New Jersey. I'd just gotten my driver's license. Maybe it was even a learner's permit. And was going to a show in Morristown, New Jersey, and bumped into you on the street. And you were like, where'd you guys come from? And we said, well, we drove from the city. And you said, well, we need a ride back later. And I was just like, my head just exploded at that moment. And we went to see the show, and we met up afterwards, and I gave you a ride home.
That's true.
And it was like, for a 16-year-old kid, it's like, how did that just happen? The line between audience and band just disappeared. And I think as, people up here who kind of spend their time figuring out how to relate artists and bands to fans, something that we can all relate to as fans, but also as professionals, I think, at that formative moment, to be welcomed by a band, and then subsequently, when you guys would come around to when I was in college and I'd go see you and you guys were happy to see me and would talk to me. I mean, this stuff sounds, really basic, but I think that wasn't a given. And, it gave, I don't know about you guys, but, experiences like that gave me confidence to go on and be a professional talking to artists.
And I will say this, and I think it's kind of important, is that this was never really a marketing strategy of ours to be nice to fans. We didn't think like it was going to hurt our career, but I think part of, obviously we've been in this band for a long time, going on 30 years, and I think part of it is that it's like, how do you keep a band together for that long? I think that Brian and Adam and I just weren't assholes. I think that's just part of it, is that we just ended up being kind of good dudes, and getting in a car with a 16-year-old who loves your band feels like a genuine good time for me. Like, it was hilarious for me too, to be like, how'd you get home? I don't know, these two 16-year-old dudes drove me home, which is still something I would do. And so I think that part of what all of this is, and I just was actually on Rhett Miller's podcast and made this exact same point, is it's like, you just have to do you in the biggest way that you can. And so for us, for whatever reason, I'm an extrovert, and Brian really shined through this. He doesn't like to talk to people in the same way that I do, but he made this rep program because he loves this, and he made this thing happen. But it wasn't marketing driven. It came out of like a real love of people and a real appreciation of fandom. And so I think really that like a takeaway isn't like, oh, you should all start going, like letting your fans drive you home, unless that feels like something that would really be a gas. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I want to say that what came of that, what came of the passion of like over 1,000 Guster reps being out there spreading this music to their friends with like, here, I'll sell you one for $10. Here, I know these guys, was that we would go to Irving Plaza and play a show, and it was like the Beatles at Shea Stadium. It was like, and it was amazing. Like these people felt connected to us. And, now our fans are around 40 years old, and it's not the Ed Sullivan kind of energy in the audience anymore. But there was a certain passion that came from learning about a band through word of mouth and through a personal connection that you wouldn't get through just hearing a band on the radio.
And I think to that point, you mentioned Irving Plaza. We've talked about Wetlands, and the live music scene in New York and around the country was a little bit different back then. There was less of a focus on live music, and that jump from Wetlands to Irving Plaza for you guys and for I think a lot of the bands that we all grew up on. I mean, it felt like jumping to Madison Square Garden. Playing Irving Plaza was a real venue with a huge stage and everything. Well, Wetlands had that community feel that Pete and Charlie brought the Brooklyn Bowl here, and I think that that's something that. Really as a fan, when you saw your favorite band, whether it was Strange Folk or Guster or Gosh Your Wine or whatnot, make that jump, you felt like you were part of that in a really tangible way.
And I guess the one other thing I thought about quickly was like, I don't think we could fill a stage full of like successful like entrepreneurs. It's not just like, oh, like Guster has famous fans or something like that. I think it's very interesting that that so many of our reps ended up in live music, because it was almost like we gave people an opportunity to demonstrate their fandom. And I think that's kind of a cool takeaway if I'm thinking of like a live music conference, like and I think we've said that a lot too, of like Dalton, our manager, like we are constantly thinking of like, let your fans support you, give them an opportunity to do it. So all we had to do was crack the window as a bunch of 22-year-olds and say, here's our CDs, and then some people would take the CDs and we would never see them again, but Andy Johnson in Oxford, Ohio would be like, come stay at my house, I booked you a show, and we would play to 500 people in Oxford, Ohio, and then that became like a mainstay of our touring. And so I think there's really like, again, I'm just trying to loop this into something broader than patting ourselves on the back, is that there really has been an instinctual moment of allowing your fans to demonstrate their appreciation and allow them to help. And you guys just sort of, I mean, it's interesting to see that this was probably one of the first times that you were ever on a street team. I mean, I don't think that word existed when we did this. That wasn't a thing. There wasn't a street teams back then. So you guys, I mean, I would be curious if that was maybe one of, I mean, actually it's not that interesting, but.
I think we're supposed to open it up to a little Q&A.
No, are we at 30? We have 33 minutes left.
Mike knows this kind of stuff.
Oh, is it Q&A time?
No, I think so. In addition, as you said, you have people. Maybe you can have a panel of people who were successful in the tech industry, but you definitely could have a panel here of people who are successful in the media and the live music industry. All you guys, for me as a music fan in the New York area, you guys have all been influencers to me in very different ways. I was curious some of the ways that all of you guys have, worked with Guster and these guys individually in the years since you were Guster reps. I mean, I know that maybe we start here with Noah, who the other, I guess, parallel story to Guster's rise was kind of the Wetlands in the mid and late 90s, and you were an intern at Wetlands, I believe, at that point. And I believe you maybe did some underplays with these guys, put that together, and then obviously now you're part of the management team. You and Brian have made records together, so give us a little history of how that kind of all happened.
I mean, it's really through Guster that I met Johnny Beach, and he kind of opened all these doors for me. I'm, calling Johnny and say, like, what's that program at NYU you go to? I want to go to that. You go to shows every night? How does that work? And then he was like, oh, I'm working at the Wetlands. I'm doing some work down there. I said, can I come with you? And met Jake and met Pete. And I think because of my knowledge of Guster and all that I learned through them. Like Wetlands was a storied place, and like just fell in love with the scene there, and I was just like a 19-year-old kid just running around, having the time of my life, and every once in a while trying to convince Guster or Brian to play like a solo show, or have Brian come down and see this band. I think the timing for me was we all moved to the city at the same time. Like I started at NYU, I think in 2000, and that was right around the time you guys moved to New York too, right? So we would talk about records and Bell and Sebastian and Pavement and all that stuff, and just became friends, and would go like hang out and see music together.
I remember you sending emails regularly, and I remember the moment where like I was just kind of like annoyed by this persistent guy, and then I remember the moment that flipped to like, oh wait, Noah's into Pavement. He's my friend I go to concerts with now. And so there was always that blurred line between fan and friend with Guster. And Noah and I became pretty close, and I produced his band's first record, Sam Champion. Are there any Sam Champion fans in the house? And now you manage us, and now we send angry emails back and forth.
Wait, I have a question for Johnny. I feel like we have your rookie card. I feel like your whole rise through the music industry started with us. Is that true?
Oh, yeah.
Okay,
certainly,
cool.
Yeah.
It was because I was friends with Jomo. I met. I think you're here. I saw you before, and oh, you're over there. Hi, buddy. You were working at Mammoth, and then I just remember because Johnny, you were like at a lot of shows, and you were very young for our fans, like, and so were we. But you just had that sort of that preternatural coolness that still exists even now, Coolio. And I remember. I think maybe. Choma, I don't even know if you were at Mercury at that point, but I feel like somehow it came up and I connected those dots. I just want that to go on the record that your entire career is owed to me or us. Okay, moving on.
We want to make Johnny talk. Put the microphone into his mouth. There we go.
I'm here. Which one?
Pavement, TV show.
Well, I mean, talking to Pavement, I remember I was not old enough to go down the city by myself, and Pavement was doing a Conan O'Brien taping, and somehow I convinced my mom to let Brian drive me there.
I drove you to Conan O'Brien taping.
That's correct. They played stereo.
I remember that. Because you called me and said, should I take this kid into New York City to go see Pavement? I was like, yeah, I think so, yeah.
Great call.
They played stereo. It was awesome.
Mike, do you have any more bullet points that we're going to connect it to the live music conference attendees?
Okay, well, Carla, we had talked a lot about New York, but you guys are a Boston band. You were in Boston while these guys were kind of coming through the ranks, both graduating Tufts as well as living up there. How could you describe kind of their fan base at that point in Boston around the time? Was it a lot of local people? Did you have a sense that people in other parts of the country were kind of making a pilgrimage to see them? What was kind of their reputation at that point?
So I learned about these guys. So it was summer of 1997. I had a friend, Jamie Freed. We were both living in Boston together during the summer. And she's like, oh, there are these guys. They're like kind of cute. Their music is good. Like we should go see them. And I was like, all right. And so we went, and it was super, super just local. It felt very much, it was just, it was interesting that you mentioned Rhett Miller, because to me it was such a different era of music. It was the kind of time where you could like hop down to a bar and see a band and then hang out by the bar and end up talking to that band. And that the difference with you guys is that you kept doing that, whereas I think that now it's so much, especially in the era of social media and influencers and publicists and all of that, it's actually really hard to access the bands that you're fans of. And so after that, I just started kind of spreading the word to my friends that were in different college towns, whether it was a close friend of mine who was at Wesleyan and another one who was at Duke. And then it just became this kind of thing where we would travel to see Guster whenever they were playing in a college town that one of us was in. And it kind of grew from there. I mean, you guys were still Gus, I think, when I first heard of you, but Yeah, I think it was like parachute era Guster when I started. I'm dating myself a little bit. I'm probably not the token woman, token old lady on the couch.
It's only 2 years before the rest of us started.
Okay,
It
cool.
wasn't that long.
It makes me feel better. Thank you. So yeah, it was super. It felt like a little secret that we had. And I remember actually, even though I'm from New York, when you guys moved to New York, initially I was like pretty bummed. I was like, no, this is like our Boston secret. This is the thing that like my other friends don't know about unless we in Boston have introduced it to them. And then it just kind of, sorry, that sound obnoxious. I just meant like, originally that's what it felt like. But then it just grew from there. But we really connected so similarly. You guys probably don't even remember this. I was on Newbury Street and I saw the two of you walking and I was like starstruck. It was weird. And I, like, for some reason, I like jumped in front of you and for some reason I was like, oh my God, you guys are totally stoned. Like, you seem stoned. And you were like, we're not. Like, what a weird thing to say. And I think I was just like nervous, but I think because I had already emailed the account, I remember that you emailed me back. And you were like, hey, Carla, you're so stoned. And we just kind of became friends. And I asked you to play Happy Frappy at a show for my friend because she loved it. And I knew you guys hated playing that song, but you played it anyway, which was so nice. It was just like, it's really the exact same thing where it just started from this really kind of organic, nice connection that the band had with their fans. And then as it grew and grew, those of us that had been listening to you for years, we just felt like early adopters. Like, it no longer felt like we had kind of seeded you to other places besides Boston. It just felt like we were glad that we like got in on the ground floor, you know?
Stars like us.
Yeah, they're just like us. Exactly.
I have a question for my manager, Dalton Sim. As we signed to a major label, and in 1999 put out a record, and we didn't have distribution problems anymore. And so there was the struggle of what do we do with this rep program? How do we keep these passionate, motivated people involved and engaged when we no longer really require them to spread the music? And so did we make an appropriate shift to like keep everyone involved, or did we just kind of let it dissolve? I'm asking because I don't really remember.
I think we did try to do things. I think one of the things that we did through that initial rep program is, you remember you had, and this was the connection that you guys were building with your fans, which was a very early thing, is you actually had fan contests to actually be on Lost and Gone Forever. They came in, you needed a group gang chorus for a song when you were making that record in 1999.
Fa-Fa, they sang on Fa-Fa.
Yeah. And so we did it. So we were trying to figure out other ways of like that connection that we had with the audience in a rep. Could we do contesting with them to give them some sort of reward to keep that deeper connection with you guys? So obviously that wasn't something that we could do for the hundreds of reps that we had at that time, but there was, I think it was a half dozen people from the New England area went up to Bearsville and got to sing on the record. Yeah.
I drove them in a van from New Jersey.
Yeah, exactly. So I think what we tried to do is keep doing those sort of things as the years went by, and then as the internet took over, you know, things changed. But I think it was really still something that we were always trying to do with keeping a broader connection to the fans. And I think that ultimately, you know, morphed into really treating our mailing list not just as this like informational thing. You know, Brian writes all the emailers still, but really is like the deep connection to the fan base, you know, and so that was, you know, that's still a huge lifeblood of what you guys do. Those emailers are you know, the most impactful thing that we still do directly with the fans in terms of communicating with them, and you still get emails back that you answer.
I mean, I don't think the spirit ever changed as far as like us like stalking our fans, which is kind of what we've always done and still do. I think there was a point though where we had radio play and where we were selling out big venues, where, you know, Guster reps really couldn't claim their spot on the guest list, and maybe the personal connection, the intensity of it kind of dissolved a bit. And maybe it was just a necessary part of evolving and the emergence of social media and all those things. But I think in the last 5 to 10 years, we've kind of rediscovered that spirit a bit, and found ways to keep everyone engaged and spreading the word and passionate and feeling connected to our band through other means.
Yeah, and I don't know if you guys remember, but it's probably 7 or 8 years ago, we did that program where if you actually came to a live show and you had your Guster badge still and those sort of things, you automatically just got to go to the meet and greet afterwards. So where we couldn't necessarily, maybe it's not as easy to go hang at the merch booth as it used to be. We tried to bring it back as a connection of all you had to do was actually go to the merch booth and show that you still had your rep badge or that you remembered it, and you were just added that night, and you guys would go and reconnect with all those people that way. And I think little things like that still goes a long way, and I'm still amazed how many people at shows come up and say, oh, I remember my rep name, or I'm getting together with friends again, that I haven't seen in years, and we had this common bond with each other. It's pretty special that way.
There's always a real personal touch, to every communication, I think, between the band and its fans. And there was a personal touch in person, I think, for all of us. And, plenty of bands have fan clubs or communicate with their fans, but I think if you're able to connect with a fan, whether it's over the internet or in person, in a way that feels genuine, they'll never forget that, if they like the music. And 30 years on, right? It's
I would say
everyone's on board. Everyone's cheering you guys along.
I would say one thing that was always important from our perspective is that, in the music, I wanted people to feel like they knew you guys, even if they didn't actually really know you. I wanted them to feel like that's Brian on stage, that's Ryan on stage, in the same way that, when I first started to learn about the Grateful Dead, I felt like everybody knew Jerry and Phil, but I don't know them, but I felt like I knew them for whatever reason, and it was probably more to do with the community of fans that I was around that I loved, but I felt like that was really important. And what's interesting about what Laurence was saying was originally in the business, and I think, for people that work with bands, this is really important. The business at that time in the late 90s, they didn't understand the connection that we're talking about right now. They wanted this barrier between their rock stars and their fans. And so when I first started talking to record labels, I say, well, we have this connection with our fans. They're they didn't get it. That was weird to them, And so when the internet happened and all those sort of things, all the things that people started talking about, the grassroots movement, we were already doing. It didn't seem foreign to us because that's just what it was. And all the other bands that we liked really did the same sort of things. And all the things from the wetland scene, those bands were all doing those same sort of things. And so it felt very natural. And that hasn't changed for 20 years.
Yeah, I think Guster and Laurence kind of alluded to it. Guster had a sense of, when you're always afraid to meet your heroes, right? Because you don't want to be disappointed by them. And I think, anytime you had an interaction with Guster and, as 15-year-olds and 16-year-olds, they were our heroes in a lot of ways because, we would travel around the country and see them play and, it was real and, they would remember your name and they would, and that goes a long way. And I think ultimately, and even to this day, people just wanted Guster to win and they rooted for him and they had a great team around him with Dalton and Pasty on the road and, Scott Clayton, who was their agent, and French, who is their agent now. Just people that are good people that, when you have that and you see, because you see a lot of teams out there now that you don't want to win. There are a lot of bad people in the music business.
Like who?
Well, let's see.
Name names.
I think my mic's broke. No, it was great, and I for me personally, I think Dalton was one of the first managers that I really knew in the music business, and I had access to as a fan that I would go to shows and talk to him and email him, and I think, even when I worked at Sire Records, which is that a major label? Yeah, scary. But when I worked at Sire Records, our priority was a pop group called Eden's Crush, that was a WB show, and on the other side was Guster, right? And like Pacey would be on the road and be like, hey, I was in this venue in Kansas City. There's no posters. What the hell's going on? And I was more in a rush to get Guster posters out to Kansas City than I was to worry about Eden's Crush, because it just wasn't real and didn't have that connection as a fan. And so, as a music business person, which is such a terrible term, like, me knowing a manager and me talking to a tour manager like on a regular basis was so helpful to me in what I have gone on to do in my life.
Well, I want to piggyback off that too, because early on, I think for all of us, this kind of occurred not only at a transformative time in the music business, but for us at the ages that we were at. I mean, we were all like mid to late teenagers when we kind of got introduced to you guys and got to know you guys. And I will say, for me personally, like, getting to know Brian was a life-changing experience. I mean, I was, a kid going to the wetlands every night, basically, during the week. I'm not connected to any other band that I saw at the wetlands at that time. These guys really went out of their way, and Brian in particular. I mean, I remember going back to college that fall, and I was like, man, I wish you guys would come down to Philadelphia, because I was driving all over the Northeast to come see them. And Brian's like, well, why don't you just book us at your school? And I'm like, I can do that? Like, what does that look like, right? And so I ended up like going and joining kind of the activities team and bringing Guster to my school. And that was
Villanova, right?
Yeah, Villanova. I think that was the first time you guys played the state of Pennsylvania. Slept on my dorm floor.
And you played violin
played
on stage.
Terribly.
You played violin.
The rest of the show was good, though.
Yeah, the rest of the show was great, but it was, But I mean, and that really changed my life. I mean, it really, I continued to see these guys throughout college, and after I graduated, went into finance. It was a terrible decision, and Brian's like, well, why don't you come out on the road with us? And here we are.
Well, you were also, just to fluff you up a little bit, you were like the best road person we ever had. You took over, man. Let me just say one thing about Michael Pasty Corcoran. He went from being like our kind of merch guy to becoming our tour manager when we went from a van to a tour bus, figuring out that transition, and then he started taking over the lights, and for the whole Lost and Gone Forever, Keep It Together era, which was our peak, he was running this crazy light show that he taught himself. He was so motivated, and when you bring farm team person up, sometimes you just hit a home run, and when you quit, we never recovered.
I will say, and I want to say one more. I just want to say one more thing about this too, because I learned a really valuable lesson in my life as a result of you working with us, because we had somebody that was way more qualified doing the tour managing job when you were on there, and it was a little bit toxic, and it wasn't a good match. And we were like, but this is just a kid, and he's not going to be able to do it. But it was like, no, he's smart, and he's motivated. And it really it was the first time that I had like an indelible proof of concept of like, no, you empower smart, capable people who are good, and that's who you want to hire. That's who you want to surround your life with. So it was throughout our whole... It was throughout the thing of it, and it's even true, like being in a bus, life's too short to have toxic people around you, and it ends up poisoning, especially in a touring environment. And that was the first time I was like, it doesn't matter if they know how to do the job. Are they smart, and do they give a shit, and are they great people? And then that was the first time it was just made manifest, where it was like, oh, remember Pasty? Because he didn't know anything, but then at the end you knew everything. And I just thought that was that's the lesson that we learned from our reps. It's not a one-way system. It is.
No, but all of us gave a shit. Like, all of us really gave a shit. I mean, I think that was the thing. It's like I would see all these guys at shows, and I mean, everybody, and it was like we were all just like friends, and because we all had this common bond, and we all gave a shit.
If I listen to a recording of a show from the 90s, it's just unlistenable and awful.
Great point, Brian.
Well, that was either mine or Pacey's, probably. Right? Yeah. My tape or your tape?
I don't know. I still have a lot.
But I think that's a question I had, and the three of us were talking about before, and that we've talked about this a little bit. You guys grew up playing Wetlands, which was obviously known a lot for the jam scene and the ska scene and a little bit the hip hop scene. But you guys were a pop band or an indie pop band coming through those ranks. And I know for myself and a lot of people here, maybe Fish really taught us how to be music fans, and Guster really taught us how to translate that fandom into a career and a life. But you guys kind of had a very different approach to your music, yet you fit in so well with all the people over here. I know, Rich was a taper. He taped probably most of the shows that are on archive and stuff from that period and stuff like that. For you, what was it like? You were taping Godfrey Wine one night and then Guster one night. And,
it was really hard because Brian would play the bongos and the levels would spike and it would distort at the end. I remember that we always had to watch. I'm a nerd. What do you
Highly technical.
Yeah, super technical. Taping Guster felt natural because again they were aligned with the scene, and I think I've discovered them through From Good Homes, who I taped a lot of, and the shows were different sometimes.
Yeah, it was weird that there was a taper community around our band because we never improvised.
I think
Ryan,
you know what, the most improvised thing was the banter.
Yeah, but I don't even think
and
we
the tape,
did that.
taping for the banter alone sometimes was worth it. Sometimes not. But sometimes
Absolutely.
definitely
There were spontaneous moments.
There were definitely. I mean,
a lot of accents from you,
the
Ryan.
Lionel Richie. I mean, you would figure out a great creative cover song, and Brian too. I think early on it was like, how can we make this fun? Like, we're playing to 5 people. Like, let's engage those 5 people.
Yeah. I'll echo Ryan's point that it's weird we had a taping community. We played the same songs in the same way every night. There wasn't a lot to see except for some random banter night to night.
But what you did do was you were playing new songs out. You didn't wait for albums to come out or any of those sort of things. You would just play those out, including Johnny Beach's favorite that you've never recorded, Bear. Which I remember because he still brings that up to me every once in a while.
That's deep.
But that was a taping thing. It's kids wanted the new songs. That was one way of doing it.
Airport Song was a jam, right?
Mike, did you have anything else on your bullet point live music agenda?
It was proto-post jam. It was really ahead of its time.
Was it just a long song?
Yeah, this is a really long song. Well, I think that was an interesting point in that you guys did have, we mentioned Bear and Happy Frappy and these songs which everyone here is looking at us blank stares, but for a 15-year-old kid, if you guys did do those songs, that was a special moment. And that it's kind of crazy now when we're talking about larger music industry things throughout the day to kind of come back to that moment, and it reminds you why you were a music fan. The fact that you might go to a show and they might bust out Bear or Happy Frappy or Pantomime or any of these non-recorded songs that really were part of my youth and made me want to keep going to concerts because you'll have those spontaneous experiences, and that's still why I go see music. That's why I saw Lizzo on Sunday or Vampire Weekend last week.
Well, there was an inclusive element because when you went to see a show, you didn't know what was going to happen, and you were already backing the guys because you were young and you liked the music and they were cool to you, and you could go say hi, and they gave you time, and you felt you were a part of something, and there was a spontaneity and a little bit of an insider thing, and when you're a kid, that's. You felt like you belonged to something. I think everyone's been cheering you guys on since then. And maybe without it being calculated, it's helped the longevity of the thing to have.
Not everyone cheers us on, but a lot of people on stage have.
Train.
One other thing I would say is that I feel bad that we only have one woman on this panel. Because I think you guys also, especially for the the wetland scene, you guys had a very large multi-gender fan base and stuff like that. So there were a lot of female reps too. So I just want to point that out too, especially at that point when there was always jokes about going to dead shows in the 90s, and there was the line at the guys' room was really long, and everyone's wife could get in really to the female bathroom for the first time. But you guys actually, I think, always had a really nice mixer of people in your fan community. So I want to make sure we point that out.
That was one of the best parts of going to a Guster show as a 16-year-old kid. It was like older college girls.
I guess, do we have any questions? Right over here.
Should we give a microphone kind of thing, or is it a shouty deal? Oh, there's a whole system you guys have in place. Sorry, just got here.
Hi guys, this is so cool, really unique. Yeah, let's clap, let's do it. I feel like clapping, let's do it. The first time I saw you guys, I don't know if you remember this show, the University of Dayton, they had this thing called Dayton to Daytona.
Oh, we remember that show.
Oh, wow, interesting. Not what I wanted to ask about, but you'll have to tell me after. My question to you is, like, for aspiring artists and musicians at this time, like in this age, what would you do now, like using the model that you used back in the 90s? What would you do to kind of translate it to the modern era?
I mean, things have changed so drastically. I'm not sure that a lot of bands have 4 years to drive around in a van and slowly develop an organic fan base, because there's the promise of, like, if you just put your thing on the internet, maybe a blog will write about it and you can have overnight success. We took the long road. It's tough to connect to the modern setting. Ryan, you have the internet.
I don't know. I don't know about the internet. I really think that I really think to kind of echo what I said before, which is true. It's just like, you need to find out where the band is the most comfortable and what they want to do, because I really don't want the idea to be like, hey, if you're successful at music, you need to like hang out with your fans, because I have a lot of friends who are musicians who hang out with their fans, and it's excruciating for everyone, and I would never recommend a fan ever talking to their person, because you don't want to meet them. But if they're really funny or witty, I mean, I just think this happened to be, this was just like a lightning in the bottle thing, because this is what a natural inclination was to be accessible, to trade on verisimilitude, to be sincere in almost all interactions. And Brian also had a good memory, so he would be able to remember people's names, and that's a very good alpha quality. But if I were a young band, I would just, like, I have friends who are like, who do, I don't know, I don't think there's a better way to do it. One way is better than another. You just have to be true to whatever the hell you are and lean into that.
I would say it hasn't changed that much. At the real level, like, I think that if you actually went and toured, even if it was small, and started to play for people, met people at the merch booth afterwards, like, that stuff goes a long way, and it still does. And there's bands out there that are in different scenes where they're doing that, and it's happening, and it's not all over the internet, and then all of a sudden you find out about it. And so I think that while the business has changed, there's some real truth in the connection of, like, why are we here? Live music. You can't, that feeling that you get does not change. And so if you have that feeling and you get to meet your audience or connect with your audience in that way, I think that I haven't seen anything buck that trend.
I just want to add that show Dayton to Daytona, where they flew all of the kids from University of Dayton in Ohio down to Daytona, Florida, for us was shocking. It was the first time we actually felt like we were the band in one of those MTV spring break kind of things. It was just bikinis and just party atmosphere.
Not a great show. No, I remember. It was a terrible show, but hilarious.
I mean,
so glad we're talking about it.
We stayed and partied in the pool and just kind of lived it up the way you would expect from us.
College girls, right, Noah?
That's right.
College girls.
When you were 16.
That's right. That's right. I'm glad you flew across the country so you could have that moment. And live stream on relix.com/conference call. Does anybody have any more questions or statements or anything? Pete Shapiro.
In the fourth row.
I think that.
I'd be curious if the panelists could give an example maybe where something's happened in their jobs recently or in the last few years, whenever, and they were able to use some of their Guster knowledge or what you learned from being a rep or that kind of frame of thinking and approaching things you were able to use today that had, it's pretty good, right?
Nice segue.
I want to hear, Beach, or Pace, any of you guys, girls up there. We want to hear some
Johnny Beach.
Beach.
How do you use your Guster experience in the last Johnny Beach?
I don't know. I mean, I can try to book another Push Stars reunion or maybe a Jump Little Children show.
Wow. Loved the Push Stars. Where are they?
Chris is still making music. He is. In Rochester, he's making solo records. And they just put out a record, too, I think.
You raised very wordy emails.
I think that we use, Dalton, I think you would
What,
agree.
have
I
you
think
seen anything similar?
we use a lot of the old tricks. We use them again. Like there's, for this third annual show festival that we're doing this summer called On the Ocean in Maine, you know, I think last year we just try to come up with these like fun ideas that old fans would relate to. Like we sold like fake bootleg Guster shirts on the street.
How about this? And I don't know. I think that on some level too. This is probably, I'm only interjecting because I'm trying to loop this in. Is that we're aware of the intense. There's an intense fandom, right? You're hardcore. You're super fans, and they're always in our minds about how we plan events, like how if we give them access to the after show, or what kind of show is this going to be. And there is a little bit of that there's like almost like a nuclear power plant, and they're a source of this thing, and that you definitely always have to consider your super fans when doing this thing, because they're so much of the gas in the engine. And I think we really learn that with the reps, is that you really honor the people who drive 7 hours to see you play. And it's really what it is. It's just about honoring it in whatever way you can. You can honor it by just acknowledging it. You can honor it by giving them access. But I think it is some of that hyper fandom that we just want to say thank you. We understand what a sacrifice it is, because it's so meaningful when Jack O'Pears called me back. And it was that kind of thing that we wanted to kind of sustain.
I also think, like, to answer your question kind of backward, if you were into being a Guster fan or a Guster rep, it meant that you were looking for some sort of community and you wanted genuine connections with people. And so I think that rather than, like, thinking about how, you know, this community impacts me in my day-to-day job as a journalist and an editor, it's more like the way I lead a team at a magazine is exactly it's all the same stuff that like made me want to connect with other fans and connect with this band. Like I've had plenty of really terrible bosses in my however many years as a magazine editor, and the ones that aren't great at it aren't great at leading a team and aren't great at communicating and aren't great at connecting with people. But I think that the ones that are really good and really successful really seek out other people's opinions and look to their team to see how they can kind of band together and make something better. And I think it's like the same reason all of us wanted to do this when we were teenagers.
I'll speak to one project that I worked on recently, the Casey Musgraves, the Golden Hour era. I mean, that's something where, I mean, to your point of like, you do you, like she's like crushing it in terms of like, she knows who she is. She has a very strong point of view, and, you know, she connects with her fans in a very genuine way. And like, you know, there's certain access that we afford certain people, and it's like this whole community of people that just like, even though she's not super active interacting one-on-one, she's created this community of people that are like-minded, both in terms of the music, but I think even socially active, and like,
and her personality, that she owns all of this stuff. I mean, it's such a good example. Casey's such a good example of how this, to sort of answer your question, like she's not meeting her fans, she's not hanging out with them, but there is that sense of like, I'm rooting for her, I know her, she's a real person behind this. Yeah. And I think that's what was so interesting about Twitter and social media when it came out, was like Twitter, I think I joined we got the Guster thing. I think there was 400 followers on there. And I was like, I'm going to do this in a first-person voice. This is never going to be about tickets are available now. I always wanted it to be something that felt really personal, that was just me. Like, I like cream cheese or whatever. It was stupid, but it was this idea that, like, because when I would follow other people on Twitter and they weren't doing that, I was like, this is a manager. This is bullshit. I don't want this to be part of my life. And I think Casey is a perfect example of that, who owns her entire imaging of just like, she's running this and she's making this like, it's a very personal thing. I think that's really the distillation of the whole thing.
Well, to answer your question, as an artist manager, working with artists who are always trying to connect, maybe have been doing it for a long time, play a lot of shows, starts to feel like just routine maybe, and I think by, remembering what it's like to be that kid in the audience and remembering the moments you had as a young fan and the moments that kind of built your confidence and built your insight, to become who you are. I think we're always trying to create those moments. And I think, however you can do that, whether it's by going to the merch table and talking to fans or by sending that extra note on social media and doing it in a way that's genuine or, in your own voice, or being spontaneous in what you play, and remember that time they did that, or, it's things that can seem routine perhaps to an artist, are anything but for a fan when you're in that moment, and I think, I carry that with me always, in any situation professionally.
We have a question in the front row.
Obviously, Brian and Ryan, you guys are incredibly cool to your fans, especially back in like the grassroots days. I'm curious if, in your own experience as a music fan growing up, did you have any experiences with musicians, good or bad, that colored your attitude towards your own fans? Did you meet anyone in there particularly great to you and you wanted to carry that on?
I actually had to think about that to think if I ever met or had any interaction with any of the bands that I liked. I liked Billy Joel a lot, but I had no access to Billy Joel. And in college, I liked Max Creek. And can I say Max Creek and people know what I'm talking about?
You're at the Relix Music Conference.
Brian, it's the Relix Live Music Conference.
I've never been able to do that.
This is the only place you can do that.
But Max Creek was a band we saw in high school and would dance to and would hope for certain songs, but we never interacted or met them. So yeah, this was, for me, a whole new thing, but it felt very natural.
I'll give you one that I kind of wanted to think about, the samples. Because the samples were on a major label, but then they were hanging out at the merch booth. And they were also they were so fearless in concert. I think one of the coolest things I ever saw is they would do a thing where they would invite people to come on stage and play their instruments. And then I remember it was the first tour we ever went on with a real band. And at one point, the only people playing the instruments on stage were Samples fans. And I would just remember feeling like that was a really big thing. And I think one other band was really impressionable to me was one of the biggest things that ever happened to us is we opened up for Bare Naked Ladies on an entire arena tour when they were at their just peak powers. We played every arena, including the Garden. And the way that they ran their show is part of what we're talking about, the banter and just being extemporaneous and improvisational just in conversation, was I just figured that I was going to have to stop doing this the more, or we were going to have to stop being goofy the bigger we got. And then they would just go balls out every night on an arena. They would just make up a song and talk to each other. And I was like, shit. And then that's what made the whole thing so special. So, it happened later in our career, but it was so important for me to see that you can just be who you are. And they were amazing at banter and being so funny. And it was one of those things where I was just like, oh, we can take this. And it really kind of put more gas in my tank for just being the more if you fuck something up, you don't pretend it doesn't happen. You point it out and you make fun of the person. And then that engenders this whole thing. And I think it's such a spirit of our band. It's just to really call, again, the verisimilitude of just the truth-telling at all times is people smell bullshit and you can't ever condescend. The second someone starts condescending to you, the whole thing falls apart, especially our band. So I think I really learned that from those two bands.
The Samples, I remember, did something really cool. This is way before a Kickstarter or Pledge Music, whatever. I think it's for Transmissions for the Sea of Tranquility, where they thanked all their fans in the liner notes, and they had this really an extra insert, and it was really small font. I remember one of my friends was thanking a magnifying glass to find his name, but it felt like a real moment. He was in a CD, which was in the CD binder with all these big artists, and that's something that they were years ahead of. And speaking of, I guess, fans who became celebrities who took some of your ethos with you, Kesha was obviously a huge Guster. Can you talk a little bit about her reaching out to you when she was young, and then you re-meeting her and eventually collaborating with her?
Well, you had the first interaction with her.
I mean, yeah, I emailed a lot of our fans, and I remembered their names. I remembered their email addresses. I remembered their faces. That was just kind of how my brain works. One of them in Nashville was a girl who I would kick the back door to the Ryman open because she wasn't of age. And I remember her email address was acousticsoul15@aol.com.
Yes.
And then I remember she kind of pushed her demo tape on me in a weird way. I never listened to it, whatever. And then I never thought of her again. And then it was maybe 10 or 15 years later that Ryan ran into Kesha on the beach. And she was like, I'm Acoustic Soul 15. and so Ryan called me and was like, do you remember Acoustic Soul 15 at AOL.com? I'm like, yeah, I remember that girl. He goes, she's Kesha.
That's all true.
I don't know if she was a Guster rep.
I don't think she was a Guster rep. We probably have time for like one question or something. I don't know, or not. I can wrap it up. I can wrap it up. Hey, this is real cool. I gotta say a thing just real quick. You know, Mike, this was a weird idea of yours to do this, and it's very flattering. It's humbling to be in a space with so many thoughtful, intelligent, and motivated people who are still involved enough in our careers to want to put themselves up here. So I do want to thank each and every one of you for coming up here. It's a real honor. And I hope, I don't know. I hope that this was helpful in some kind of way. I don't know.
I don't think anyone feels helped.
Yeah.
It's
well,
fun.
maybe that's not what this is about. Okay, we can leave here pretty soon. Can I say one thing that has nothing to do with our band, but does have to do with live music? I saw Bjork on Sunday, and it was one of the greatest things I've ever seen in my life. And she's playing like 3 or 4 more shows. The tickets are stupid expensive and hard to get, but you all work in live music, and you should go see it because I've never seen anything like it in my life. And it's so, why? Because, why did it feel good? I'll tell you why. Because it's the most pure expression of creativity because she's such a fucking weirdo, and she's so beautiful and amazing in every part of it. It was visual, it was musical, there was so many things that came at you over the course of it, and it was a ton, and I want to talk to every single person that I meet about seeing it, and just as a live music fan, I mean, I probably see 75 shows a year. I've never seen anything like it, and if you're all involved in live music, I just have to like demonstrate my fandom because it is just an all-encompassing show. I mean, we also saw The Who on Monday, and The Who were great, but it just, I don't know that I can ever just see a show again. It's so great.
Do you have any of her CDs for sale?
Yeah, they're $10.
I'm a Bjork rep.
Well, are we cool? Did we do it?
Yeah, well, you guys will be back in August, Central Park, right?
Yeah, Summer Stage we're playing.
You're going to play Bear for Johnny Beach?
We're going to play, yep. You guys will all come up. We'll get more of our feet. We have, our demographic for fans is not 91, in 90-10, just so you know, Carla. Thank you, Carla, for being our
Carla.
Hi, thank you.
We celebrate you.
All the Guster fans in my life are women, I will say. So.
Give it up for Ryan and Brian and all this wonderful music over the years. And Adam.
Okay, thanks. Pete Shapiro, everybody.